started, Doug, I'm going to tee up just a little bit. And just kind of give everybody some context. Good morning, Cheryl. For what we're talking about today, CS for the content classroom. That's kind of a broad topic, but one of the things that we've really seen over the last several years as computer science continues to gain traction, not just in Washington State, but around the region in the country, is that there's a lot of great curricula, professional learning available for those that are looking to teach CS as a class. As requirements come into play, certainly in the state of Washington, with the high school requirement coming in by 2023, standards and so forth, there's a growing interest in, again, that focused content to teach CS as an actual course. However, there's not quite as much available for those that are looking to take not just CS itself, but computational thinking and the skills and pedagogical practices that go with that, and bring it into a mainstream classroom, a science classroom, math classroom, social sciences, and so on. And so what we're really excited to talk about today is a solution that AVID Center has developed in relation to teaching and using computer science in the content classroom. And I'm going to turn it back over to Doug to take us through our presentation today.
Awesome. Thank you, Ty. Thanks for that introduction. Appreciate that. And yeah, just we're trying to take a different approach at AVID in terms of how we look at computer science relevant to the content classroom, and what instead of focusing like a lot of the trainings out there do on turning every teacher into a computer science teacher, we're trying to look at how we can help teachers make computational thinking and computer science work for them within their content area. The actual original name of the training when it was in development was computer science for the non-computer science teacher, right? Because we were focused on our ELA teachers, our math teachers, our elementary teachers, helping them figure out how best to make that work. And Ty is going to be driving for me on the presentation today. Let's see, Ty, whenever you are ready, if you want to bring that up. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
It looks like a couple more folks step in too while we're doing introductions. So I want to say welcome to Lawrence and Jennifer as well. We're glad to have you joining all of us here. And see, and Patrick, Cheryl, and Greg, thanks for hanging out with us through that. So computer science for the content classroom. Right. This is a project joint venture that AVID proposed together with Amazon Future Engineer. We collaborated it in terms of the development project itself. Amazon Future Engineer largely in a support position, and then AVID being able to lend our professional learning design expertise to this project. And without further ado, we'll kind of jump in and start sharing some more details as far as the goals of the project, as well as the objectives and whatnot for learning. So our agenda, that overview, scope, and objectives. The two are the LMS, of course, because this is a little bit different presenting environment for Ty and myself. We're going to leave that piece for the Q&A as folks are interested. We use Canvas kind of under the hood for our learning management system. And so if you are familiar with Canvas, that's what the mechanism we use there, but we'll be using a slide deck with some screenshots and whatnot for talking through today. We've got some video clips that we have on hand, and we have screen clips, and we have descriptions for today. We're warned with Hopin, it's a very high bandwidth presentation platform. And so the risk with the videos is that it would crash or not go through. So we'll speak to those, and then during the Q&A, we can have some flexibilities for as far as what we look at. And then, of course, Q&A at the end. So primary themes for our focus here. CS for the content classroom. So computational thinking, right? CT is becoming, I think, kind of exploding in terms of how it is being utilized and people's understanding of that and what that looks like. And this is something that we've been very mindful from our early work in developing STEM trainings with computational thinking, starting about 3 or 4 years ago. I've been trying to watch that. And so if we had a long enough title for this, this would almost be called Computer Science and Computational Thinking for the content classroom. Then thinking about transferable skills, because again, we're not trying to turn teachers into computer science teachers. We are trying to help teachers realize in a lot of ways what computer science is beyond coding, what they're already doing in that skill set, and how they can utilize those strategies to help them with their content areas, whether it's English language arts, science, social studies, art, math, you name it. And that ties into the shifting of mindsets, right? We're trying to get folks from thinking about learning to code to coding to learn. And then finally, learning as a social experience is a big emphasis for AVID trainings in general, right? Allowing lots of time for processing that learning, be able to talk through, right? Because talking is thinking, and that that social construction of that knowledge for those of you that are big Vygotsky fans. All right, thank you, Ty. That's our themes in a nutshell there. And heads up on the chat, as we're managing these tools, I will try and keep an eye on that. Since Ty is piloting screen sharing, he's not able to see the chat, and I'm a horrible multitasker. I can't walk and chew gum, so I will try and keep an eye as I talk. But we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A too through at the end of this. So our key development points for this project. Emphasize gradual release responsibility, right? Starting with large training wheels, smaller and smaller and smaller, making sure we have lots of scaffolding along the way so that teachers can feel comfortable and confident as they ease in to this. We actually start with a lot of unplugged activities, and we actually don't even get into the coding until it's a 3-day training and day 2 of that training itself. And keeping in mind also, we have a lot of different ability levels, right? And even though it is designed for the non-computer science teacher, for example, we do have computer science teachers that sign up. And so we do try and take care of them as best we can, as well as our brand newbies, and making sure we adjust for that all along the way. And with all that in mind, with our activities, we try and be very intentional, right down to the icebreakers and the relational capacity building. That all ties back into those computational thinking, computer science skills. So people are learning and practicing as they're getting to know each other. So some highlights from our course description. Some things we've already mentioned as far as for the non-computer science teacher, but for all content areas. And we were excited that when our computer science teachers signed up, they still felt like they got a lot of takeaways, right? Not of course, advancing their coding skills to any greater depth, because they are already way beyond that where we're going for our newbies, but in terms of activities and being able to connect and share with their colleagues as well. Again, across all disciplines, and really the focus is on helping teachers expand their toolboxes. So they may, most likely, they already teach several different approaches or skills and strategies within their classroom. They may not know the verbiage from within the computational thinking and computer science realm, but we help them to name that, to recognize that, and to maybe more effectively be able to speak to that in their classroom, and then also better perhaps be able to leverage that in terms of transferable skills now that they know a little bit more about how that works in different contexts. All right, Ty, if you advance to the, perfect, thank you, sir. A little slow on my end, I think.
No problem.
So problem solving was one of the things in particular we honed in on. Every content area, you are solving problems, right? Whether it's math or English language arts or history, the problems look different. But how do those basic problem solving skills and strategies, right? Whether it's looking for patterns that you can recognize, whether it's breaking down a problem into smaller parts, so you're decomposing that big problem into small pieces that you can address, or abstracting the key information involved, or perhaps designing an algorithm to solve. Again, across those same skills and strategies across all disciplines, and again, those transferable skills we've been talking about, right? What do I use within computer science computational thinking that might accelerate student learning elsewhere? Now, I named several computational thinking skills and strategies. And Ty, we're getting some menu options popping up there.
Okay, sure. Sorry. Yep.
That's okay. But also could be something as simple as like debugging, for example, right? Now we think about debugging within a computer science context where I'm looking for the errors in my code, but we can take that same strategy or idea, right? And maybe I am writing an essay and I'm having trouble getting across my main idea. How do I debug that essay, right? To better draw out supports for that main idea, or even trying to solve a math problem and I'm just not getting the answer I'm expecting. How do I debug my computations within that math problem to figure out where I might be going awry with my strategies and approaches. This is the overview that we use. We try and help create a big picture all along the way for our adult learners to help them have a good sense of what we're doing, what we're working on, and where we're going. And on this, which you can see, the red star kind of points to where we'll be talking about first. That whole day one is all about introductions and establishing a why for computer science, helping build understanding for what computer science is, also helping to uncover some common misconceptions and preconceived notions. Then we ease into day two, where we're getting into the actual coding itself. And day three is within really, okay, you have these skills and strategies. Let's step back, think about your content area, right? Your content classroom, your teaching context, and how can you transfer these skills to that those lessons and that curriculum and whatnot. So one of the early things we do, we have a short little video that we show. It's a Microsoft video. It's one during the Q&A. If folks are interested, we can provide the link. You can check it out later. But it basically provides some quick hooks. It begins the process of developing those common definitions for folks, and also helps in terms of getting them to start co-constructing ideas. But it first and foremost, it speaks to the why, right? As a society, computer science is becoming more and more integrated across all areas of our lives in terms of technology and just also job skills, right? And so no matter what job path or career path you are taking or area of study you're focusing on, there's probably a computer science tie-in that, as a student, if I can either think like a computer scientist in terms of problem solving, I'll benefit. If I could even go a step further and be able to contribute to an area of software development or something along those lines within my area of specialty, then all of a sudden I've greatly increased my marketability as a graduate professional. The first vignette that we just screenshotted here for folks, but it gives you kind of at least a little bit of a window into also what the classroom structure looks like within our e-learning platform that we use. And of course, if you've used Canvas before, this will look familiar. This first part here, it's an actual discussion, kind of debriefing the why with the video. And what we really want them to kind of uncover and think about are those problem-solving connections, computer science as a language, the storytelling potential. Something Scratch, for example, is great with, right? Is those the focus for programming is around the sprite, right, or the character, and then really getting folks to think about how are we helping our students transform from consumers of technology to producers of technology, right? One of those key differentiators as we help our students go deeper. The activity then leads into what I mentioned earlier during that day one, that kind of uncovering of preconceptions. And so we provide participants with, we do an activity where we have several statements we provide, and then they do an anonymous true, false. And the participants then can vote whether they think it's true or false, but it can protect them and help them to feel free to share what they're thinking, right? And I'm not going to get the wrong answer. And then we kind of it gives a good formative assessment for where folks are at. And in this case, computer science always requires computers, right? This is a common misconception among people, among teachers that maybe haven't been involved with programming at all. And we don't present it in this black and white of a format. We kind of did it a little bit more false true coloring here just for the sake of this presentation. But what we do is we have a statement, we discuss it, we start to uncover people's thought processes, and then we provide some just quotes from either industry sources or experts to talk about some different ideas on that. For example, right, unplugged activities do not require a computer. And that's a great way to teach those computer science skills to ease both our students and our teachers into those ideas, as well as to build on those ideas in other and unique ways and help with transferring those ideas across content.
You know, that's a really good point, Doug, because at a very macro level, when you're in the work on a regular basis, it's easy to take for granted that everybody understands that computer science is more than just coding. And so it's very imperative that early on in the professional learning, we unpack this. What is this thing? It's almost like, what does a mission statement or a vision statement have to do with the day-to-day work? Well, it has everything to do with it. It kind of sets the tone and the timbre for why we're doing what we're doing and why it even matters. And so this is a really critical part of the sequence.
Cool. Thank you, Ty. I appreciate that. That's a great highlight. And as we're helping people kind of uncover and unpack that, right, and figure out that big picture, and also for themselves, their own thinking, we have them do at this point kind of a word cloud, where they're sharing what they think is a word that might help with defining computer science. They, again, anonymous formative assessment, but also what we do is we build a word bank then from which folks can kind of construct at this point, okay, what do I think computer science is, right? We're going to get many different answers. I mean, even ask 10 computer science experts across the education field, and you're going to get 10 different answers. But just to start with that kind of that co-construction, that also that metacognition, that they're aware of their thinking, about their thinking, whatnot. And that builds into then having a shared definition. And on the next slide here, it'll show a definition that we use just for common language during this training. We're very careful to say this is not, universal definition of computer science, but we want to have some sort of common language as we're going through this together. Many of the participants in the training are brand new to computer science, period. They've never coded before. Many of them write their first program with us, which is always fun and exciting. And so this is when we adapted from Codeorg, not their K-8 level curriculum, and again, emphasizing the problem solving piece, right? And how coding can be just a very effective way to teach that. And again, you can see the map here where we're at. Now we're kind of transitioning into day 2, which is easing into the coding piece. And we go into this next slide here is called the computational thinker. And we, with permission, we use skills as listed by Barefoot Computing, their nonprofit computer science education entity, actually in Great Britain. But they do a nice job of breaking down the skills in a just a nice, simple, straightforward way, and then as a starting point. By no means is this less comprehensive, right? We're starting with folks and getting them thinking. Now the 4 pillars, if you have looked at computational thinking, yes, those 4 are the ones that are most common. There are different variations on that. You'll see that ours is pretty simplified and that we just picked the one word each. Most likely you'll see pattern recognition. You might even see data analysis and abstraction listed as a full pillar. But these are folks who are brand new to this. We're trying to ease the entry for them. And we do speak to and are trying to raise people's awareness about, hey, there's variations on this out there in terms of the professional discussion at the moment. The right side, that again is just examples, but people can see right away, oh, collaborating, right? That's a transferable skill, right? And actually on the flip side, we're trying to also change the idea that coding is something that somebody does by themselves in a basement somewhere, right? Software education companies, they're working in teams. And the collaboration is a critical skill across the board. I mentioned debugging may not be as obvious, right? That was an example I gave earlier, but that's an example we can speak to in terms of how that transfers across content areas. And then the others, of course, we can actually spend all day giving examples for these, which is great. Lots of stuff here to dig into. The next little screenshot of a video vignette activity that we have is it's a discussion. That we do around its reflection on a unplugged activity. That's a relational capacity activity where participants in their groups are basically they're still getting to know each other. They're showing where they're at, and they have to, using their computational thinking skills that we've talked about, those 4 pillars, think about the best effective way to see people around the country on this training. So travel around and pick everyone up. Not unlike the traveling salesman problem, if you're familiar with that one. And then we're also, again, honing in on problem solving. We use Codeorg's problem solving approach just as a model, building familiarity and connections there. And we talk through folks through that.
Doug, you make a good point there about leveraging Codeorg as a model. One of the things you'll see throughout different products and different solutions AVID creates is it's about the learning and not necessarily the tool. Some of you may be aware that we have a regional partnership with Codeorg in the Pacific Northwest, but this professional learning isn't wed specifically to Codeorg. We try to leverage examples from other providers that are of high quality and of low to no cost to give educators some exposure to different tools that they can use in different content areas that we feel would prove effective. But we do that purposefully to remain agnostic in the belief that it's really about the learning and not the tool. So again, it's not necessarily about Codeorg per se, but we feel that they and some other providers have solid tools that the learning can take place with.
No, I really appreciate you clarifying that, Ty. It's a really important point. We utilize MakeCode and Scratch as well throughout this training. In fact, the first coding activity is done in Scratch, and it's probably safe to say that it's about 30% of our content roughly is related to Codeorg, 30% is related to Scratch, 30% is related to MakeCode, and about 10% is probably just various resources from across the web, across a number of unique organizations. So growth mindset, big piece. Again, our approach is this is computer science for the content classroom. So we are emphasizing how can computer science better and computational thinking skills help a classroom teacher be more effective in their area, as opposed to trying to turn them into computer science teachers. So we're not hitting the coding super heavy. We do coding throughout the training, and those activities, I think, if you're familiar with some basic coding introductions, they probably look pretty standard. We use a code your name activity. For Scratch, bootupPD.org has a nice take on that one that we utilize. But we really emphasize things like social emotional learning skills and growth mindset. And we're trying to prepare, build folks up too. The majority of participants had not even written a program before ever. They were super nervous. And one of the big pieces of feedback we got is by the time day 2 rolled around, we did a lot of unplugged activities. We did a lot of unpacking. We did a lot of thinking about this. They were ready, and they were a lot less nervous or anxious about getting into this. And then the last piece, talking about growth mindset, really helps them to be in that growth mindset space for themselves, as well as when they introduce it to their students. And then we do a whole discussion around social emotional learning, all the ins and outs of that. We talk as we lead into growth mindset. One of the things I appreciated, I wanted to be sure and mention, one of our participants shared quite a bit about how she felt that these, at this point, we'd really hit on all the aspects that we talked about in terms of the social emotional learning, whether it's the management of time, the sharing, the collaboration, being able to help and work with others, right? These really what comes down to a lot of time, since you can think about executive functioning skills too, in terms of the planning, the goal setting, all those things. So people were really prepared. They could see then all these connections to their own classroom. This one is just a little highlight. Again, we partner with Codeorg, so we do try and highlight where we are integrating. And you see there are a lot of Codeorg activities here. If you're familiar with Codeorg, these will look familiar, but again, keep in mind this is probably 30% of the actual training content itself.
One thing with that that I want to emphasize is the open source nature of some of the featured tool examples. I've heard in my work with Codeorg and others that this can be a big investment. That's obviously a big emotional and professional learning investment for those that haven't done it before. When you're teaching computer science in a mainstream classroom, it's probably not something you necessarily went to college to do, or maybe have received formal training on from before. And so there's various levels of investment that folks make to be able to do this well. And when possible, we try to emphasize high quality solutions in terms of tool providers that don't require the educator to make an extra financial investment when possible. That's not always something that can be done, but when possible, again, open source resources like Doug already mentioned, MakeCode, Scratch, in this case, Codeorg, are really tools that we want to highlight, and first and foremost, because of the quality and the usability, but also because they don't have an extra barrier in terms of the financial piece for the acquisition of curriculum.
Thank you, Ty. That's a really important point. We're trying to make everything as accessible as possible for folks. And then day 3, again, is about making all of it practical as well, right, and transferable. And so we look at some sample lessons. We look at introduce folks to some ISTE standards. They haven't seen ISTE standards before. We focus on the computational thinking students component there. And we also introduce a whole section on social justice. AVID is dedicated to closing opportunity gaps for all students. Social justice is a cornerstone of our mission statement and what we do. And we really believe powerfully that computer science is a social justice issue, right? The lack of access is an equity issue, the lack of computer science education in schools, period. And one of the driving means to our approach here, right, is, okay, if we just are, I want to be as polite respectful to other organizations as possible, but some organizations are taking the approach of like, hey, we need to make more AP courses, we make more of these gatekeeper courses. Our approach is no, we need to go the other way. We need to make sure that every teacher feels comfortable and confident either bringing coding into their classroom or creating opportunities for students to bring it in for projects, whatnot. So at least they're comfortable having it happen. So that students everywhere, regardless of class, the class type they're taking, right, their location, they can have access to an exposure and experience within computer science related activities. And here is the example of our choice board that we provide for teachers, a whole range of activities from a variety of sources. You can see the Codeorg ones, they're flagged, but there's a whole, you can see a whole bunch that are not Codeorg. And then we allow teachers time to explore, to look at, and then they go in and actually create a showcase project for themselves by the end, and they choose the platform, whether it's Scratch, Make Code, or Codeorg when they do that. And that brings us to the conclusion of our tour here. And I know we went through some of this a little bit fast, and one thing I am working on is talking more slowly when I present, so I apologize. I realize I still speak a little fast when I do it. So please feel free to ask us to repeat any part or aspect. Also happy to dive deeper into any of the details, or just answer any questions you may have during this time, or revisit or any aspect we may have referenced. And so with that, I think what I'd like to do, Ty, is, you can of course put your questions in the chat. You've been so gracious in allowing just to be the Doug and Ty show up here. So I believe through the moderation control, I can give people permission to show their camera and speak to the microphone if they are comfortable. Please do keep in mind that this is recorded, so I don't want anybody to be caught off guard with that. In case you're not comfortable, but if you are comfortable, I believe I can give people permission.
Yeah, and if you have a question that you don't necessarily feel like sharing verbally with your video on or anything like that, feel free to go ahead and drop in the Q&A, and I'll grab those out of there, share those with Doug, or answer them myself, and we can attack it that way as well. Greg, you have a good question. How long have we offered this professional development option?
Yep, excellent question. So actually, this summer was the inaugural deployment. So we held about a dozen trainings across the country. The remote people logged into, we trained around 600 to 700 teachers this summer. And yeah, the original proposal for this project was about 2 years ago. And so it's been a long road in terms of development. AVID has roughly a year development cycle where we do very extensive involvement in putting the professional development together.
One other note on that too, Greg, you may have noticed on that last slide, we had a note about Net Promoter Score. For those of you who aren't familiar with Net Promoter Score, what that means is it's a score based on how likely somebody is to recommend the product, good, or service to a friend or a contact. And AVID has enjoyed, over its 40 plus years of existence, a pretty devoted following of educational practitioners and users. And we were very pleased to find that over the course of the summer, this brand new content, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't this have the highest Net Promoter Score of any other DXP content this summer?
It did, and we were very humbled by that. Being a brand new, AVID has some legacy offerings that have been around for a long time and have a very high devoted following. And so I was, honestly, in being in this project from the beginning, I was like, please be in the middle, please be in the middle, and just not the bottom. And no, we came away with the highest Net Promoter Score in terms of recommendations, which just blew my mind. So I feel like we were able to really strike a chord with folks, and just in terms of the unique approach for empowering teachers with how they can make computer science computational thinking work for them.
One of the big takeaways from folks that I know who've taken the course is, again, as I said a few minutes ago, this is not an assumptive training where we assume a body of knowledge or a level of expertise or what have you on behalf of the user. We give people a chance to talk about computer science for what it means to them. We present, as Doug showed earlier, an actual definition that we use for it, but also acknowledge that there's different perspectives, different viewpoints on what computer science is and even should be in an educational context. And so what that does indirectly is it makes people feel okay with where they're at on their computer science journey, maybe not having taught it before, which is, again, the type of teacher that we really encourage to take this professional learning. So by starting off on day one with some of that tone setting, setting of what I would call comfortability for the participant, so they know it's okay to be new, it's okay to maybe have an evolving sense of what computer science actually means, that helps people approach the rest of the learning with confidence and an okayness about where they're at in their learning journey.
Yeah, and thank you, Ty. That's very well said. That very much was our, we want comfort and confidence, right? For our teachers. And this was open to grades 3 through 12. So we had quite a range. We very carefully constructed it in terms of kind of the cross-pollination of discussions and whatnot. And
Doug,
actually,
there's
oh, sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to. Cheryl has a really good question, which we have a good answer for. Doug, does somebody have to be an AVID member to take this?
I love this question now, because this has been one of my hopes since joining AVID, was how do we open things up? And we have opened everything up. So AVID trainings are available to AVID members and non-AVID members. So all schools, all teachers. Thank you, Cheryl. I am so excited about that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where that's a fairly new decision. Obviously, we've all had impacts on our lives, both professionally and otherwise, made by COVID. And in addition to the launch of AVID Open Access, I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the chat real quick, Doug.
Sure.
AVID Open Access is our first ever fully open source offering of content that anybody can grab and go with anytime they'd like. It was in that sort of same time frame that we started to evolve some new ideas about how to bring our solutions to the marketplace. And as Doug said, this content we're talking about today, whether you're at an AVID member district or school or not, is going to be accessible to you. I do mention AVID Open Access in the chat again, because there's a whole suite of other resources that we've either developed ourselves or we've partnered with other best practice organizations to curate in a common format for you in a, again, grab and go sort of fashion. Some related to CS, others related to STEM, digital teaching and learning, and so on. But again, in a roundabout way to continue to add on to Doug's answer of Cheryl's question, this and other content is available to those at AVID schools and districts or not.
And let me see if I can grab the full URL here. I realized it cut me off, but there was a question on, thank you, Shan. Oh, it's automatic. Hopefully that URL, it's an https://www.avid.org. So hopefully the auto fills for you. It's cutting me off there. And I can type that fully out in a moment. That gives the 2022 schedule for trainings. We have this coming summer. It'll be both in person and virtual trainings. It'll be the first time we offered it in person since the beginning of the pandemic. And the virtual, or the in-person we call our summer institutes. And thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. And then the virtual we call our digital experience, or digital XP. And you can do the virtual trainings from anywhere. It is by time zone, so you want to be aware of that, right? If you're Pacific and you sign up for Eastern time zone, and I hope you're an early bird, but you can also travel in person as well to the Summer Institute trainings.
Doug, speaking of offerings available from AVID that are available to both AVID member districts and schools and beyond, what comes next? Is AVID planning to stop here with this content as it relates to CS and the content teacher, or what might you have up your sleeve?
I appreciate that, Ty. We're continuing to innovate. We're very excited. The positive feedback we got this summer has really given us a huge boost in terms of energy and focus here. And I love the conversations, a lot of them came out from the grades 3 through 12. And obviously it was very positive in the feedback we got too. Being able to kind of differentiate and focus elementary and secondary does allow for some more personalized training pieces. So we're going to be offering a K6 elementary version and a 612 secondary version, where AVID looks at all the feedback that we get. So we are actually in the midst of right now. I'm on the design team, so we're going through and we're looking at, okay, how can we improve? How can we make this better? Okay, they like this. How can we do more of this? This maybe was a pain point for some folks. How can we fix this? And so our hope is what you'll see multiple offerings, in person and virtual. You'll see the elementary and the secondary versions, and you'll also see more individualization, right? We're even offering more choice for folks within the training itself. So when we're doing activities in terms of skill sets, we do things like, okay, for exploring coding, right? Here's a mild option, here's a medium option, here's a spicy option, right? If you really want to challenge yourself, things like that, just to help folks really make the experience the most of it for them where they're at and meet their needs.
I purposely teed you up with a question there, Doug, thinking about what comes next. I want to say thank you again to Shannon for having us today at this summit. And when I think of some of the great work OSBI is doing, we're getting closer and closer to 2023 and the requirements related to CS at the high school level. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we have resources and tools available to educators in schools, districts, and sites in general who are teaching CS at that level and beyond as a full-blown class, or looking to teach it in a content area as they're able to. The other big piece with this is, what are we doing to create CS pathways? Doug talked about the current offering being focused on 312 and then future forward offerings breaking that down a little bit more. I like to think about this like I think about baseball. Out in the Pacific Northwest, we have the Mariners and the Rainiers and so forth. You can't develop a great major league team without a good minor league system. And it's just like any other discipline that's, well, I'll call it standardized at the K-12 level. You don't stop taking math in 6th grade, nor do you start taking English language arts in 7th. There's a continuum throughout your educational journey where it's expected you're going to have growth points in a continuum all the way through the pipeline, coming out the other end as somebody capable and competent to perform in those disciplines. And so we feel the same. CS is a pathway discipline that needs to be developed and enhanced with tools, both curricularly and in professional learning, that allow teachers to play their role in that minor league system as we try to produce quote unquote professional people, to use a baseball term again. This is very important to think of a systems approach to CS and how CS for the content classroom can play a role in preparing teachers to think that way. And that's something I don't see enough of in the marketplace with the work I do for Codeorg, is understanding the role that we play as educators in that system. Our job is to get that student the next level of expertise they need and learning they need to move on to the next grade level, or perhaps into a post-secondary educational environment. And so we really feel that this solution and the solutions that are future forward in this arena can definitely help teachers, again, better understand and be an active part of that system within their school or district.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ty. And we're trying to create as many on-ramps as possible too, right? We want the on-ramps, of course, to start at kindergarten, even pre-K. But also we want there to be on-ramps all the way through the senior year, right at the end. So that if for whatever reason a student hasn't had a chance yet, they still have a chance to get started, to get that experience. But yeah, in terms of what Ty, that minor league analogy is so poignant, because when we think about student engagement, and I believe there was a study done by, I want to say, St. Mary's College, but it's an older study now. It's dating back to about 2011, 2012, but I've seen recent articles reference it. It's still as accurate. By 4th grade, we've got a third of kiddos already saying, yeah, science, math, technology, not for me, right? And then by 8th grade, you've got more than half. And a lot of times it's just because we haven't provided the right opportunities for engagement. And it looks like we lost Ty to internet issues. I know he was having a little bit of internet trouble when he and I were engaging before the session. So we'll see if he's able to rejoin us. But I'm happy to take any additional questions that folks may have. Oh, welcome back, Ty. I was just saying we may have lost Ty, but he may be back. We'll see.
Put the boots to me for a second.
Yeah, I'm glad to take any questions. I just wanted the screen all to myself. So. But yeah, we'd love to answer any questions or anything. Oh, Greg, thank you. Convincing leadership, yes. And that's our hope, right? If you're an AVID district, our hope is that, hey, this is AVID. And actually, our new training that's coming out, our new training versions, it's actually not just K6 elementary, it's pre-K6. We're hoping to get some good engagement pieces for our pre-K folks. We're trying to be really mindful of that. But that that lends credence to that argument, right? Like, hey, they got a training for pre-K6. We need to be starting this early. And another thing too, and I love that you're advocating with your leadership for this. And I've been there, man, with my leadership as well. And I taught, just background, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning, but I was an elementary school teacher for 10 years, an instructional coach for 4 years, and used to go through and create 700 Codeorg accounts for my teachers, probably all the students across the whole building. It was a whole day every fall. But one of the things I love talking about teachers is like, and this may or may not help, but it did in my case. The thing, just illustrating like things like patterns, right? Pattern recognition, one of those 4 pillars of computational thinking skills. And patterns are everywhere, right? Reading is patterns of letters and sounds, right? Writing is patterns of words. Numbers, or math is patterns of numbers. Science is patterns of ideas. History is patterns of events, and that goes all the way. All of the decoding work that students are doing with just their early phonics work and starting at kindergarten, right? That's totally relevant. And sequencing as well, right? That part of that algorithm pillar is sequencing and getting the order, whether it's the order of the alphabet, order of sounding out words, or ordering of numbers. Those skills are transferable to early kindergarten. So love that you're working on that.
Greg, one of the things I think about with your struggle to talk to leadership about why this matters in the early grades. Frankly, in some cases, you have to manage up if you can as a teacher to try to paint relevant pictures for leadership around why this as a pathway and a systems approach is really the only way to produce consistent results. Again, I use a baseball analogy, which resonates with a lot of folks, but there's different ways to kind of talk about this in a way that helps paint the picture that this just isn't an elective. This just isn't an add-on if you have time. Now, granted, to give them some grace, we're dealing with the pandemic. We're dealing with an educational environment nobody's ever seen, where a lot of leaders are just trying to survive. They're just trying to get through the core stuff as they see it. And in environments like that, things that, should be core to what we're teaching, but haven't been traditionally core, can easily be marginalized in favor of stuff that quote unquote keeps the lights on. And that's part of the rallying cry around CS, not just in Washington, but around the country, is looking at it as more than a one-off, more than just an elective, but something that truly at its core, computational thinking is essential for all disciplines. And that's, again, something that's going to take time to convince leaders and other decision makers that this should be thought about throughout the pipeline.
No, thanks, Ty. Well said. I just popped a piece in the chat too about the social justice and equity piece too of access, right? Any other questions folks have? We just got a couple minutes left here. We do really appreciate you hanging with us for the whole time. Thank you for being such so gracious in terms of the presentation, as well as asking great questions and engaging with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys very much for being here too. I mean, these are some great new opportunities for us, and hopefully we can collaborate. I know I've been asking for a little bit, but hopefully we can offer this to more teachers too across the state. So thank you very much. When you're working with the teachers in your sessions, how do you deal with the fear of computer science, the fear of coding?
That's a great question, Shannon. That's one of the cornerstones of I think kind of behind the scenes thinking with the development of this offering, is we really try hard to ease people in, to make it as transparent and safe as possible, and then to slowly build them up um, through the course of the training and their confidence. And they have a chance to do these unplugged activities within what we call essentially their family groups. They have a either whether if it's in person, it's table groups, but if it's online, it's the same breakout room groups each time throughout the training. So they really get to know each other. They really develop those relationships. It becomes kind of a safe space. And they're easing in through these basic activities with computational thinking. This is how this works, and we're not even doing that first coding activity until the end of the second morning. So they've had all of this time together to get comfortable with the ideas, the concepts, the unpack, and also the hey, this is this is a safe space. This is okay wherever you're at. Think about the social emotional learning on the growth mindset side. Okay, now we're going to do a very basic coding activity together, and then we build from there. So by then they're eased and they're comfortable, and we're not just throwing the coding at them first thing, right? We're building all this other kind of behind the scenes ideas in terms of strategies and concepts, but things that are comfortable for them as teachers.
That's great. That's really
thanks.
Wonderful. When you start talking about SEL and computer science, I mean, some of us can look at that and see the link. It's fairly easy if we've been doing this for a while. But what do you find are the most common links with SEL when you're looking at your course?
Good question. I'll do a quick follow up to the previous question before I launch into that. Just one other thought I want to say. Oh no, you're good. I paused and then it came to me after I paused. One of the things that we share with participants during the training is that our biggest hope by the end of the training is, yes, we'd love for them to be comfortable to go out and start doing programming, right, and whatnot, and activities in their classroom, and that's where we're hoping to get them to. But at the end of the day, if they leave comfortable, right, if they leave feeling like, hey, this is okay, maybe I'm not in a place yet where I can do this, but if my kids want to do a project around coding, right, I'm okay letting them, even though I don't not fully there yet. And that's again, speaking to that fear piece, I think, like making it safe, like, hey, you don't have to know everything, and that's okay. Let the kids, right, trust the kids, let the kids, set them free, and then let them empower them, right, but letting them be teach other kids and also teach you. But making it okay not to, because that's the thing, is the teacher feels like, deep down there's this core thing where we feel like we have to know everything, which is impossible. Right.
And you have to feel okay with that too, though, as well, and coming to that realization. When I did coding exercises with my students, I made mistakes. I would spell variables wrong, or I'd forget semicolons, or I'd twist letters up. And I had a student tell me that I made more mistakes than any other teacher he knew, and I loved it.
Yep.
I loved it because I was giving them that opportunity. So I think you're great. I think that's great.
No, I really appreciate that, Shannon. And that speaks so well to the second question as far as the social emotional learning skills. Where do those tie in, right? And how are our students supposed to know how to navigate? We call those first attempts in learning, but any sort of a failure or mistake, unless they see it modeled. Yeah. Right. And we as a teacher are in a position to model, like, hey, this is okay. Oh, yeah, I made a mistake. No big deal. This is how I approach. This is how I solve it. This is how I work through that. Right. And whether it can be that perseverance, what Angela Duckworth defines as grit. Right. But that perseverance to work through, or whether it's having that growth mindset, or whether it's having the skills in terms of collaboration to be able to say, okay, I don't know exactly how to do this, but I know one of my table mates probably does, or my neighbors in class probably does, so I can ask them to help me, right, to think through to how to solve this, and things like that. I think that that help students to, those are life skills that we can teach through computer science, but they can help kids be successful in general.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely, our pleasure. And I one of the initial communications I got was we'd go until 11:30, but it looks like we may have gotten to go 11 until 11:40. Got some bonus time, which would be awesome.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. I'm thinking, well, since you got your communications from me, that's.
Oh no, not at all. No, we're good. We're happy. Ty and I'll go all day. Right? We're happy people are here with us. So yeah, if we got time, any other questions folks want to plop in, we'll keep going until they do the digital equivalent of hooking us off the stage.
Cool. Have not seen that yet.
We can demonstrate.
Yeah, I really like the way that you integrate the AVID part into these courses as well. And somebody who's never been part of AVID, do you want to say a little bit about how that foundation helps?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with AVID, AVID is an acronym itself, Advancement via Individual Determination. And AVID is a whole, Ty was talking about systems, right? AVID is a whole system itself in terms of a school success system. It started with the focus on preparing students who were first generation college students, giving them the supports they needed with an elective class at the high school level, and it has spread to entire K-12 school systems from there, as well as we offer a whole variety of trainings across the board. And within that, we like to sprinkle what we call AVID strategies, which honestly, in most cases, these are just good, solid teaching strategies that we function as, I think, somewhat of a collator, where we go through and look at and say, okay, what are these research proven strategies that, when done in a certain or very effective way, can yield results. And so we have certain approaches that we look for in terms of things like culturally relevant teaching. How do we support strategies so you're reaching all your students? Or we have a common acronym we use, we call WICR, which stands for Writing, Inquiry, Collaboration, Organization, and Reading. And the writing is really writing to learn, reading is reading to learn. But then how do we use those skills in an integrated approach so that we're really helping students to be successful, looking for those key ideas or points in each lesson. So that's something we talk about. We have a writing process we look at. We have a whole school-wide success system, as I mentioned, in terms of school domains. So whether it's looking at school culture, how is that effective, professional learning and training systems, leadership, right? How are they functioning? What are best practices there? That sort of thing. So it's this, evidence is this whole big thing, and then we take aspects and pieces of that, we do weave them into their trainings. But we do it and try and do it in such a way that it's accessible for folks who may be non-AVID. And we have an AVID 101 course that we offer included in the training. It's optional that folks who are new to AVID can take, or if you want a refresher before the actual training itself. So if there are any little references we make, then folks can know what it is we're speaking to.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I think if you want to close, we are probably at that point. Any last things you want to say?
I think just thank you again, everyone, for being here. This work is near and dear to my heart. As an elementary teacher, 10 years, at a high impact Title I school, where we had across the district itself was like 140 languages spoken, and then as an instructional coach and whatnot, just seeing you see the disparity in opportunities for kids, right? And every kid should have access to every possible opportunity, every hope, every dream, regardless of demographics. And so how do we create mechanisms and systems and opportunities to close those opportunity gaps, and providing ways for kids everywhere to access computer science in every content area, every teaching context is one of those ways, and that's our hope with this offering.
The other thing I would say is that growth mindset point is really, really crucial. Shannon, you told a story about you're the most wrong teacher the student had. Well, that's important. Failure is good. Failure leads to learning and knowledge, and you can't grow if you're never challenged or fail or make mistakes. And having that be okay, having that be part of the cultural norm for that to be okay, and modeling that for students, that growth mindset, that fail forward kind of approach is really, really important. And like I said in day one, where we talk about, setting that table of comfort and you can do thisness, I think the growth mindset is really the underlying current of all that. And I can't emphasize that enough, that as we build systems in CS, K-12 and beyond, that has to exist at all levels, both by the educator and that which is educated, and it's just crucial.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And thank you guys for presenting. I know I called you at the last minute, but you were available. I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and more of our teachers need to know about it across the state, because I think it's
Thanks for having us. It's been fun.
We appreciate it. Yeah, Ty and I always enjoy getting to chat with folks together.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thanks everyone. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye.